Are current mortgage rates sustainable? I know rates have been higher in the past, but given where house prices and median salaries are, this seems unsustainable. Or is this the new normal? Here in the DC area, it is changing perceptions of low six figures being seen as a good salary. This wasn't the case in 2020 and people aspired to hit this target. It doesn't help that everything else is pricier too. From groceries to car insurance. How do others feel? I think the question is whether our shitty salaries are sustainable. After the pandemic, six figures is now the new baseline to play. What do you mean by sustainable? If interest rates remain high, then mortgage rates will also be high. No one is going to loan money at rates lower than the risk-free return they can get on a T-bill. For example, the ability of anyone to afford anything or sustainability for people to live halfway decent lives on a median salary is multifactorial OFC and complex. Is something gonna give? That's the question. And that's the scary part. If we secured financing for our current house just 2 months later, it would be an extra $675 a month. In interest, it's complete bullshit. Rates are fine. It's the prices that aren't sustainable. Current rates aren't even a historical anomaly. The low rates before it were. They're not supposed to be sustainable. The whole point of raising rates is to break the housing market and cause prices to stop increasing. And maybe drop a tiny bit. That's why the Fed is doing it. And that only works if they raise rates to unsustainable levels. It's supposed to hurt. And it doesn't need to be sustainable. The Fed has no intention of keeping them high forever. They just need prices to stabilize long enough for wages to catch up. House prices aren't sustainable. They can be sustainable, but high prices and high mortgages are not. One will eventually break. Rates are normal, prices aren't sustainable. Any of y'all who think rates will go down quickly might benefit from going back and looking at rates over the last 40 years, not just the last 10. Also, yes, it seems unsustainable from a price point of view. But the supply side is totally messed up. They don't build smaller houses anymore, and getting people to swap their existing lower rate mortgage for one at 2x the rate is really hard. I don't know how this cycle will end. I fear that there will be so much pent-up demand as if rates come down that prices will be stuck for a very long time. Here in the DC area, it is changing perceptions of low six figures being seen as a good salary. Monetary policy in the last 3 years causes widespread inflation. This isn't particular to the housing market. Overall, your dollar is worth about 18 less than it was in 2020. So while housing values increased above that, 18 of the gain in housing values alone can be attributed inflation. Once inflation increases prices don't decrease even when inflation cools. That's called deflation. Literally everyone I know that bought a house in the last 5-7 years always said they felt they were buying at the peak price. So the truth is, we will never time the market, and it will always feel like a gamble. The important thing is to make a rational decision based on facts and numbers that in the longer term you can afford. Yes, because 2-3 rates were historic lows, there weren't the norm. Well, my parents' first house was like 13, so nobody really knows. I know that leaving my 2.75 will take the perfect house. At least over the last half century or so. Mortgage rates are pretty normal right now. We got a little spoiled with 2.12 and 3% rates. Trading time for money is never going to be a winning strategy in economies where the supply of money is continuously growing. You must build assets as quickly as possible, as only the income derived from assets will sustain. With that said, An increase from a 3 mortgage to 8 mortgage should equal a 30 decrease in home price. If you see a home selling for 30 less than late 2021, then the pricing to affordability relationships have already adjusted. I was going through some old documents recently and found something that had my parents' original mortgage. This was in 1979. The first house they bought for $100,000. And the interest rate was. Buying the house was a huge stretch for them financially. It's in San Francisco, and is considered a modest house. Somehow they managed, and I'm sure my mom refinanced at some point. And the house has been paid off for many years now and is worth $1.4 million. Maybe the lesson is to stay within your means and take the long view. Buying a starter house for only a few years, flipping houses, etc. is no longer attractive. Current interest rates are normal. What's not sustainable are current home prices. Interest rates are what they should be. ZIRP really spoiled a lot of the folks. Yes, for bulk of humanity 7-8 rates were the norm. If inflation is 5, then people would ask for 2 on it at 7 for bonds. This is how the world worked up until GFC. It's not interest rates that are unsustainable. They're probably at a historic mean. It's house prices that are making everything awful. Well, they have been sustaining for the last 3 years, so there's that. It's definitely wild, and I feel bad for everyone that had a good down payment saved and were just waiting a bit longer. Then boom. All this. I'm on a 5-year ARM at 4.25. I'll have 10 years left when the rate recalculates, and I'm wondering what I should do. I hope something changes in the next 2 years. I'll owe about $60,000 at that time. I see renting for life being the new norm for the majority of Americans. As long as corporations can buy houses and charge rent, sure. Yes, if prices drop about 35. This is the new normal. Rates were too low for too long, and now we have to pay the consequences. As a DC area person, there are affordable homes here. They are just townhomes now and maybe farther out. Hopefully housing prices will be flat for a while, so eventually salaries can catch up with our level of debt. No. In the past, Americans didn't have this level of debt when interest rate was higher. We are more leveraged than ever before. Give it some time and the rates will settle in around 5-ish. 8 as well as 3 rates aren't sustainable long term. Things were out of whack before the vid. Now it's much worse. The issue is cost of living, which stems from salty inflation not keeping up with inflation. In my opinion, we need to fight for lawfully equating minimum wage with inflation. More people would care since businesses would be directly impacted. This is off topic, but we all know how it is. Sure, though I don't know if current prices are. Zoomers are really getting the shaft. $50,000 college loans with compound interest. 8 30-year loans, homes way out of the norm pricing, where back in the day a blue-collar worker can work for a few years and buy a house to retire in the future, etc. Yet high inflation, but wages are still stagnant compared to what is supposed to be the natural wage growth. What happened is all that productivity gain over the decades got pocketed by the fat cats and none of it passed down to the worker. Stop spending as much as possible. Be patient for higher interest rates to bite into economy. 100. Correlation to housing prices. Low rates, higher house values. High rates, lower values. Just happens at speed of molasses.